and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. In Tehran, the head of UN nuclear watchdog met the Iranian foreign minister ahead of the February 23rd deadline set to end nuclear inspections unless the U.S. lifts sanctions. Javad Zarif has signaled that Iran wants to avoid an impasse, but warned that it could further reduce nuclear deal commitments if the U.S. does not act first. In Afghanistan, at least 2 people have been killed and 5 wounded in a roadside bomb blast a day after multiple explosions left 5 people dead in Kabul. The latest violence in the capital city follows a pattern of attacks during rush hours, targeting security forces, journalists, activists, and judges. In Myanmar, tens of thousands of anti-coup protesters have gathered again a day after the killing of 2 people in clashes with police. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned the use of deadly violence in the country. Facebook has also deleted the main page of Myanmar's army, saying it coordinated harm and incited violence. The global number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 111 million with 2.4 million deaths. In Brazil, the virus claimed another 1,200 lives overnight with nearly 246,000 fatalities since the pandemic began. Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 38 deaths and more than 1,300 infections in the last 24 hours. Nationwide, there are over 12,600 deaths and 571,000 infections so far. A passenger plane of the Nigerian Air Force crashed just outside Abuja Airport, killing all 7 people on board. A spokesman for the Air Force said the plane crashed due to engine failure.
Here is your champion for 2021, the Australian Open men's singles champion, Novak Djokovic.
Novak Djokovic has won his 9th Australian Open title after beating Daniil Medvedev in straight sets. It's his 18th Grand Slam victory. And in the Pakistan Super League, Multan Sultans have set a 151-run target for Islamabad United in their opening match at Karachi's National Stadium. Mohammad Rizwan scored 71 runs for Sultans, while Mohammad Wasim took 3 wickets for United. Earlier, Lahore Qalandars beat Peshawar Zalmi by 4 wickets. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. We begin in Tehran, where the head of the UN nuclear watchdog met the Iranian foreign minister ahead of the February 23rd deadline set to end nuclear inspections unless the U.S. lifts sanctions. Tehran and Washington have been at odds over who should take the first step to revive the 2015 nuclear accord. Zarif has signaled that Iran wants to avoid an impasse, but warned that it could further reduce the nuclear deal commitments if the U.S. does not act first. But the U.S. insists that Iran should fully comply with the deal if it wants the U.S. to remove sanctions. The crippling curbs were imposed in 2018 after the former president, Donald Trump, withdrew the United States from the deal. In Afghanistan, at least 2 people have been killed and 5 wounded in a roadside bomb blast a day after multiple explosions left 5 people dead in Kabul. The latest violence in the capital city follows a pattern of attacks during rush hours, targeting security forces, journalists, activists, and judges. Violence in the war-torn country remains high despite the ongoing peace talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government in Doha. The talks are part of the landmark peace deal signed between the U.S. and the Taliban last year. But U.S. President Joe Biden's administration has signaled to review the deal as the May 1st deadline for a withdrawal of foreign troops approaches. And moving on, in Myanmar, tens of thousands of anti-coup protesters have gathered again across the country day after the killing of 2 people in clashes with police. Earlier, police arrested a famous actor for opposing the takeover. Several thousand people protested in Yangon, Mitikina, Monywa, and Bagan and chanted slogans against the military rule. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned the use of deadly violence in Myanmar. Taking to Twitter, he called on all parties to respect election results and return to civilian rule. Meanwhile, Facebook has also deleted the main page of Myanmar's army, saying it coordinated harm and incited violence. The military has been unable to quell the demonstrations and a civil disobedience campaign against the detention of Aung San Suu Kyi. And in India, farmers say the government is exploiting COVID-19 restrictions to halt their activities and meetings in Maharashtra. Talking to the media, union leader Rakesh Tikait said the same ploy was used against protests opposing discriminatory citizenship laws. In Chandigarh, thousands of people participated in the Grand Meet of Farmers. Meanwhile, a farmer rode a tractor over his ripe wheat crop in Uttar Pradesh to register protest against the new laws. Speaking on the incident, Tikait warned more farmers would do the same if the center does not listen to their demands. The growers also slammed the government's fuel price hike, saying it slashes the minimum support price for their produce. Meanwhile, in the United States, a United Airlines flight has survived a crash scare after suffering a right engine failure shortly after takeoff from Denver. The Boeing 777, carrying 231 passengers and 10 crew members, was bound for Honolulu. More in this report.
For passengers taking the early weekend flight from Colorado to Hawaii, it was going to be a smooth trip. However, that soon changed. The flight suffered a right engine failure shortly taking off from the ground. The Federal Aviation Administration said the plane scattered debris but returned safely to the airport. It said there were no immediate reports of any injuries on the ground.
It took off like a normal flight, and I'm kind of afraid to fly anyway, and we got in the plane and I thought, this looks like a nice plane. It's clean, it looks newish. I was like, this will be fine, easy going. And we started and everything started well, and then all of a sudden it was just this big, you could just feel it like boom, and you could hear it, and we started shaking.
The Aviation Administration added that the National Transportation Safety Board will investigate the incident. Police are urging locals not to touch or move the debris, as they are required for the probe.
This park, on a day like today when it's not as cold as it was last weekend, we could have hundreds of people here. And the fact that we are still not getting reports of any injuries is absolutely shocking at this point. It's amazing.
The 26-year-old 777 was powered by 2 Pratt and Whitney engines. Boeing has declined to comment on the crash scare, referring queries to United Airlines. Investigators will focus on what caused the engine on the plane to fail and will look at whether a fan blade failed.
In Nigeria, 7 people have died after a military plane crashed while approaching the Abuja airport runway due to engine failure. In a statement, an Air Force spokesman said all 7 personnel on board died in the crash. Aviation Minister Hadi Sirika said the incident involved a twin turboprop King Air 350 aircraft. Fire services have arrived at the scene of the accident. And in Niger, polls have opened in the second round of a presidential election. This marks the country's first democratic transition of power since independence from France in 1960. Ruling party candidate Mohamed Bazoum is the favorite after leading in the first round with over 39% votes. He is up against former President Mahamadou Usman, who scored 17%. Issoufou says he is proud to be the first democratically elected leader to be handing over power to another leader, while Bazoum expressed confidence that he will come out victorious.
I have just voted after spending several weeks in the provinces. I visited several villages and had a lot of contact, and I wish for calm during this election, discipline, and that the winner be blessed with good fortune. I wish for good fortune to be on my side, of course, and I have many reasons to believe that it is on my side, and therefore I look ahead at the future with serenity and a lot of calm.
And now the global number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 111 million with 2.4 million deaths. In Brazil, the virus claimed another 1,200 lives overnight with nearly 246,000 fatalities since the pandemic began. More of the latest regarding the pandemic in this report.
France's number of new coronavirus cases increased for the third day in a row compared with a week earlier. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says all adults in the UK will be offered a first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine by the end of July. More than 17 million people in the UK have now had the first dose of a vaccine. Meanwhile, a High Court judge has ruled UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock acted unlawfully. The ruling said Hancock failed to publish multi-billion-pound COVID-19 government contracts within the 30-day period required by law. Meanwhile, Australia is pushing hard to get a majority of the population inoculated. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the precedent by getting the jab and urging the Aussies to follow amid scepticism and hesitation regarding vaccines.
I have, by my own example today, joined by the Chief Nurse and Midwifery and the Chief Medical Officer of our country, together with those Australians who are in the top priority of this vaccination program, to say to you Australians, it's safe, it's important. Join us on this Australian path that sees us come out of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Over in Morocco, authorities have detected a further 21 cases of the virus. Israel has reported a 95.8% drop in COVID-19 infections among those who have received 2 doses of Pfizer's vaccine. Iran has closed several crossing points at its border with Iraq to curb the spread of the COVID-19 UK variant. Kuwait's Civil Aviation Authority has extended an entry ban for non-Kuwaiti citizens until further notice. Citizens are still allowed to enter, but they must spend a week in quarantine at a hotel and another week at home. Coronavirus cases are rising in a number of Indian states, including Punjab, Maharashtra, Kerala and Madhya Pradesh. The rise in infections comes amid the detection of a new virus variant in Maharashtra.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 38 more people have died of COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This has pushed the death toll to 12,601. The Health Ministry has reported 1,329 new infections overnight. The ministry says over 571,000 people have tested positive for the virus so far, out of which more than 534,000 have recovered. The ministry said at present there are more than 24,000 active cases in Pakistan. Meanwhile, the National Command and Operations Center is expecting to receive another 5.6 million vaccines by the end of March. According to NCOC data, 2.8 million doses from COVAX are expected as early as the first week of next month. More stories after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. Russia says the intention of Western countries to resolve global issues within a narrow circle is baffling. This comes after the special online session of the Munich Security Conference held on Friday. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said the West views Russia and China as threats. In a statement, Zakharova took aim at the organizers for inviting the Western leadership while leaving out Russia and China. She slammed the West for imposing their decisions on the rest of the world through the prism of rule-based world order. The spokesperson urged broader international cooperation on a common agenda in the UN Democratic Agency's framework. And now Turkey says its common interests with the United States outweigh the differences. In a televised speech, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Ankara wants improved cooperation with Washington. Erdogan said he wants to strengthen cooperation through a long-term perspective on a win-win basis. He said Turkey will continue to do its part in a manner worthy of the bilateral strategic partnership ties. Erdogan added the relations between Ankara and Washington had been seriously tested recently. Ties between the two NATO allies have been strained over Turkey's purchase of S-400 defense system and U.S. support for a Kurdish militia in Syria. And Libya's new Prime Minister Abdulhamid Dbeibeh has called for developing ties with Italy. This comes after the head of Libya's new presidential council, Mohammed Yunus Menfi, met with Italy's ambassador in Tripoli. In a tweet, Dbeibeh congratulated Italy's new premier, Mario Draghi, on forming the government. He said the two countries share many common challenges, including managing migration in the Mediterranean. The Libyan Prime Minister also pointed out to opportunities of economic integration with Italy. In 2017, the two countries signed an EU-backed agreement to curb migrant flows across the Mediterranean. And in the U.S., 3 people have been killed and 2 others injured in a gun store shooting in the suburb of New Orleans. The police said the shooter was among those killed. It said the shooter struck 2 people in the shop before he was shot dead as the staff and customers fired back. The police added 2 wounded were hospitalized in a stable condition. None of the victims were immediately identified as the investigation into the incident is underway.
This is a really developing scene, so I'm going to be very brief on what I can give you at this point in time. We had one initial shooter here at the scene who hit 2 victims inside the location. Both of them have been pronounced deceased here at this location. It appears that several individuals ended up engaging that original suspect, whether inside the location or out here in the parking lot. We have a total of 3 deceased, including the 2 that were inside.
In India, 5 more bodies have been recovered from the flash flood hit areas in the Himalayas. Police say the death toll from the glacier burst in northern Uttarakhand state has now risen to 67. Search and rescue efforts are underway as 137 people are still missing. Authorities said the bodies were recovered from the Tapovan Dam project site, which was damaged by the avalanche. Part of a glacier near the Nanda Devi mountain broke off on February 7th, unleashing a devastating flood. Locals say the glacier broke after nuclear devices abandoned on the mountain by the Indian military in 1965 exploded. Meanwhile, in Spain, 9 people, including 3 minors, have been arrested after police clashed with demonstrators in Catalonia. Violence flared as over 6,000 gathered in the Spanish city for a 5th night over the jailing of rapper Pablo Hasél. Police said 9 people were wounded, 2 of whom were taken to the hospital. Protesters threw bottles at police, set fire to containers, and smashed up shops in Barcelona. More than 60 have been arrested in the protests so far. Hasél has been sentenced to 9 months in prison for his anti-establishment raps. And International Mother Language Day is being observed across the globe to promote linguistic and cultural diversity. In a message, the United Nations said languages represent who we are, and protecting this identity is a matter of human rights. This year, the theme of the day is fostering multilingualism for inclusion in education and society. The day was announced by UNESCO in 1999 and has been observed globally since 2000. According to UNESCO, linguistic diversity is increasingly threatened as more and more languages die out. At least 43% of the estimated 6,000 languages spoken in the world are endangered. Feeling frustrated and stressed out? Well, Brazilians can now vent their anger and fury in the newly opened Rage Room. More in this report.
Inside a warehouse on the outskirts of Sao Paulo, people can swing giant hammers at old televisions, computers, and printers, demolishing the machines and shredding the glass into tiny pieces. This is not an exhibition of insanity, but merely a way to release pent-up stress and anger amid a seemingly everlasting pandemic. All people have to do is pay a fee of $4.64.
This is good for those who live here. It takes me almost 2 hours to get to work and 2 hours back. You have that feeling also during this pandemic, worrying about your health, but it's great to come here and release some adrenaline and pent-up feelings.
The owner of the business says he has received a fair number of customers since the opening of the Rage Room a month ago.
I think it was the best moment to be able to set this up here in Side Tiradentes, related to everything that people are going through, a lot of anxiety, stress. Sometimes people miss work or even work a lot at home. I believe this here is like an escape at the moment.
Customers say releasing their stress in the Rage Room stops them from taking it out on other people, like family and friends.
We'll be back after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Visitors to the world's largest snow maze in Canada are set to find something unexpected as they undertake the quest to navigate it this year. Find out more in this report.
Yeah! After a period of uncertainty about whether it would be allowed to open due to the pandemic, the world's largest snow maze in Manitoba is once again welcoming customers. The larger layout and staggering the times visitors can enter the maze are a nod to social distancing guidelines. The owner, Angie Mass, says the maze is 91% bigger this year.
In 2019, we applied for the title of the world's largest snow maze, which we got in February. And this year, just with COVID and everything, we wanted to make it bigger.
For many who have been quarantined in their homes and dealing with travel restrictions, navigating the maze is a chance to stretch their legs and experience a little adventure.
We love outdoor entertainment. It kind of just fell into place. We run the corn maze, of course, in the summer, and then the Sunflower Expo as well during that time. And then as we get to fall, we have the Haunted Forest, and then we're like, we need to do something in the winter time. And I guess we love mazes as well, so there we go. Now we're into snow mazing.
For Mass, expanding the maze was no small undertaking. The massive labyrinth is 240 feet by 240 feet and took 6 weeks to build due to unusually warm weather.
And it's time now to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.